On today's program, we travel to far eastern Oklahoma to visit another of our Viewers Garden Contest winners. Extension turfgrass specialist Justin Moss helps us calibrate our spreaders for proper seed distribution, then has tips for overseeding fescue in a shady spot. And Extension entomologist Eric Rebeck has advice on webworms and spider mites. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Today, we are here in far eastern Oklahoma visiting the home of one of the winners of the Oklahoma Garden Contest. This is the home of Nan Mills. Hi, Nan. Welcome to the program.
Thanks.
You have a beautiful place here. And like I said, we are very far eastern Oklahoma. How far are we from Arkansas right here?
About 6 or 7 miles from the border.
Okay, about pretty much straight east from Tulsa.
Yep.
Yeah, just over here close to Arkansas.
Yep.
And I can tell that you've been busy the 12 years you've lived here?
Yes.
Okay, done lots of beds, lots of plantings, lots of garden projects, and I love all of these big island beds in front of your home here, all these big borders. And I've noticed you've created raised beds. How did you get those started?
I brought in some soil, and most of it was wood chips or a lot of organic matter. And over the years, I just keep piling more and piling more on there. And I hate fertilizing with Miracle Grow, so I use composted manures from animals, from the local neighbors.
All right.
And I just build it up every year.
Okay, lots of organic matter. I love raised beds because it gives you that opportunity to create your own soil.
Yes.
And you've got quite a mix of plants in here. I love all the perennials and the tall phlox here. This has got to be one of your favorites.
Yes, it is. I love the way it brings in the butterflies, and the bloom lasts for months.
It smells delicious.
It does.
Yeah. Well, I was noticing that you have a lot of plants for butterflies. You have some rue plant.
Yes, I try to grow plants for them to lay their eggs on and plants for them to eat once they are turned into a butterfly.
That is a great butterfly gardener.
Yes, I love
plants
butterflies.
For the adults to nectar on, and then also those host plants for the larvae.
Yes.
And we've got a swallowtail larva feeding on the rue plant over in that part of your garden, and great to see those butterflies.
Yes, I love watching them in the mornings especially.
Well, Nan, there's a really cool perennial over in this part of the garden, this Japanese anemone. How long has this been here?
It's been there about 6 years.
About 6 years, and this was one plant that kind of spread a bit?
Oh yes, it's taken quite a while for it to spread. It was just a small clump, and it's a long time, and the blister beetles really like to eat them.
Oh no.
This year they haven't touched them, but I usually have to hurry up and spray them or they'll just annihilate and I won't have any flowers.
All right, well they've got great flowers, and I can see lots of flower buds getting ready to come on.
Yep.
And over in this small little round bed, you've got a neat little plant that's mostly green, got a little bit of red on it.
Yep, a wild poinsettia.
Wild poinsettia, one of our Oklahoma native annuals. So those just kind of come up here and there?
Yeah, I had visited an elderly lady that had a serious cactus that she wanted to show me it blooming, and I know she had those in her garden, and so I took a couple of the small plants, brought them home, and she said, be careful, they can be a weed. She's not lying.
Okay, so they pop up here and there.
Everywhere.
Well, it sounds like you're very successful in your plant propagation. I noticed a couple of oak leaf hydrangeas over here on the side of your home. How did those get to be there?
I was helping a lady with her landscaping, and her bushes were getting too big and carried away, and I crawled underneath to see what was going on, and her previous person had put mulch over some branches that were laying on the ground, so they had set out roots. And I said, you want me to cut them off down here? And she said, sure, throw them away. I said, no, I'll take them home.
Wow, they've turned into some very beautiful plants.
Yes, they are.
All right, and you also like succulents?
Yes, they're so easy to take care of, especially when we had drought here a lot. And they just intrigued me that the little thick leaves could hold so much and take so much stress, and all these other plants. I'm draining my wells trying to keep them alive.
Those succulents definitely are tough. I love the garden you have over there with the antiques and all of that stuff.
Yep, I love it. It's just every garden is like a different room on the property.
It really is. It's quite amazing. Well, I noticed you have some vegetables and herbs over in another part of the garden. Let's go take a look at that.
Okay.
Nan, I love seeing a huge vegetable garden. You've got vegetables, you've got some herbs, and all kinds of things planted in this area. And this is a very interesting herb right here in the center. What do we got there?
That's stevia.
The stevia plant?
The stevia sugar plant, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I love teaching kids to taste that, and they just love that. It's sugar. It's like, wow.
That sweet taste.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I noticed you got some echinaceas here, maybe kind of like an herbal type garden.
Yeah, I was trying to do medicinal herbs and herbs for cooking. So I did this side of the garden this year with just that in mind, and they're growing really well. This is the Back to Eden gardening, where you put in about 6 inches of mulch. I do have drip tape down underneath of it, but I haven't used it this year. But it's to conserve on weeding and moisture in the ground.
All right, always great to keep those weeds down. And yes, lucky this year we've had plenty of rain to keep everything growing really well. Your tomato cages, I think, are the best way to grow those tomatoes, those indeterminate type tomatoes here in Oklahoma. I love the concrete reinforcing wire cages. And you have a way of anchoring those?
This year I ran out of time, so I just used brick, but usually I use a 3-foot piece of rebar and bend it into a candy cane, then snub it up next to one of the loops in there and pound it down until it grabs a hold of it, because we get thermal bursts through here that'll lay those over in no time at all.
Okay, those winds will kind of knock them down if they're not anchored very well.
Yep.
All right. Well, in another part of your garden, you have some elderberries. Are those wild elderberries?
No, I ordered those about 8 years ago, and I use them for making jellies and wine.
Okay. All right. And usually you get quite a few berries, but
yeah.
Not this year?
Not this year. I went out there and was wondering what was going on with my plants. The branches were all broken, and the corn in here was all ate up, and I had coons on the property.
Oh, wow. So the coons got to the elderberries
Yes, I
this year.
didn't get any elderberries this year.
That's too bad. Well, Nan, I noticed in the corner of the garden over here, you've looks like you've kind of cleared it out and got some gourds growing. What's going on in that part of the garden?
I designated that part of the garden for my son and his family. They live in Rogers, and they come out here once a week, and they're teaching my grandkids, 3 kids, how to garden, and they're growing gourds so they can make birdhouses later.
Awesome. All right. Get those young people started early.
Oh, yes. They were just out here and were picking tomatoes yesterday, and some of the tomatoes were in a food fight.
All right. Lots of fun in a garden.
Yeah.
Well, Nan, I think your garden is beautiful. Definitely well worth coming over here and taking a look at all the stuff you've got planted, and I think you're an outstanding gardener. Thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
So I'd like to show you how to seed your tall fescue lawn in the fall, and maybe before we do that we need to learn how to calibrate our spreader to put out the right amount of tall fescue seed. So here I've got a bag of tall fescue seed. This particular one just happens to be Crossfire 3 tall fescue, and this is a turf type tall fescue, and there are many like this. Sometimes the bags will tell us or give us a recommendation of how to set a spreader, sometimes they don't. So I always say the easiest thing to do is if you have a spreader with a particular name brand, and you buy a seed of that same particular name brand, it's going to tell you how to set your spreader up for that seed, and that's probably the easiest way for a consumer to do this. However, that's not always the case. So what I have here is actually two different types of spreaders. This one is a drop spreader that's going to drop seed directly below the spreader, and this one is a rotary spreader that's going to broadcast the seed out in all directions as you walk. And so either of these can be used. A rotary spreader is usually more useful if you've got a large area, because it's going to broadcast the seed out maybe as far as 5 feet or 6 feet to your right, 5 or 6 feet to your left, so you can cover 10 or 12 feet strips at a time. This one, on the other hand, this drop spreader, a little bit smaller, and it's only going to drop, this particular one is 1.75 feet, but they could be anywhere from 1.5 to 3 feet wide, and you just have to measure and see how wide your spreader is. Kind of the advantage of the drop spreader is you can be a little bit more accurate and precise as long as you do it properly. So we want to take this seed and figure out how much do we put out in our yard. And so the recommended seeding rate for the tall fescue, depending on if you're overseeding or if you're establishing a new lawn, can be anywhere from 3 to 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. And actually what we're going to work with today is we're going to go at the high rate. We're going to try the 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet seeding rate. And so now what we're going to do is walk through and try to calibrate this. So the first step in calibration for a drop spreader is we've got to take our tape and measure how wide our drop spreader actually is and what the drop is. And you really have to notice that the drop spreader obviously has 2 wheels, and so it's not wheel-to-wheel coverage necessarily, but it's going to be a little bit inside of those wheels. So take note of that. So when you go one direction and turn around, if you stay in the same wheel track, you're actually going to have skips. And here you see where we went one direction to put the seed down, turned around, came back the other direction to put seed down. And if you don't watch your wheels carefully, you might create these skipped areas where there's no seed applied to the soil. So when you turn around, you actually have to move your wheel over just a little bit to make sure you're getting a uniform distribution of the seed as it drops out of the bottom. After we do that, this particular one happens to be 1.75 feet wide. And so if we're going for a 10 pound per 1,000 square feet seeding rate, if we just do the math on that, that would equal a 1 pound per 100 square feet seeding rate. So 10 pounds per 1,000 equals 1 pound per 100 square feet. So now that I know that, and now that I know I have a 1.75 foot wide spreader, if I do math, I can calculate that I need a 57 foot long test run. And that's because 57 feet times 1.7 feet, the width of my spreader, equals 100 square feet. And if I have a 100 square foot test strip, I know I should be putting out 1 pound in that area. So what I can do then is just weigh out, say maybe 5 or 10 pounds of seed, put it in my spreader, go through my test run, weigh it again, and if I've put out 1 pound, like if I started with 5 pounds, I do my test, I end up with 4 pounds, then I'm spot on for my calibration. And now I know wherever I walk, I'm going to be putting out the equivalent rate of 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet of tall fescue seed. Another good tip to think about is you can go out at a half rate. So here we're going at 10 pounds per 1,000 square feet. We could go at 5 pounds per 1,000 square feet, calibrate our spreader to that, and then actually go in 2 directions, like go north and south, east and west, and that helps to ensure uniform coverage.
Fall webworms have made their triumphant return once again to our beautiful state, and as the name implies, they are typically seen in the fall, feeding in large gregarious colonies out on the terminals of some of their favorite food plants, such as pecan, persimmon, and some other hardwood species. So they form these webs, and they develop through several stages of caterpillars before they emerge as adult moths. Here in Oklahoma, we see about 2 or 3 generations during the course of the season, and they really start to show up in the landscape as early as July. So the name fall webworm is attributed to the fact that we really don't notice them until the fall months start to come around. And what you'll typically see is a tree that is lightly to heavily infested with a bunch of kind of unsightly webbing that's there. Now, one thing to keep in mind with fall webworm and with a lot of defoliating caterpillars is oftentimes the tree will survive that attack. We certainly do not like the damage that's caused by the fall webworms. It's unsightly, as you can see. It leads to a defoliation of the tree, etc. And we certainly don't like to put up with that kind of damage. However, with fall webworm in particular, there's really not much we really need to do about it unless we don't like the aesthetic decline of that tree. And the reason for that is because the tree at this point in the year is getting ready to shut down and lose its leaves. And so that tree is definitely going to be able to weather the storm and survive the caterpillars feeding there. If you do take into to consideration a management strategy, a couple things can be done. For some of these lower lying branches like we see here, you can simply go through and prune them out, clip them out. For webs that are higher up in the tree, we will definitely need to hire an arborist to get up with a bucket truck and clip out some of those branches as well that are needing to be pruned. If the infestation is very, very heavy, pruning is likely not going to do the trick. You may have to, again, deal with it for that year until the tree finally loses all its leaves and starts over the following season. Or you can take into consideration some chemical control options. Now, again, really tall trees, this is going to be very, very difficult. Again, you'd have to hire an arborist to do that yourself. But there are some insecticidal soaps. There are BT products, that's the bacterial insecticide Bacillus thuringiensis, that will cause the caterpillars to get sick. That's a safer alternative to some of the other compounds out there, the broad spectrum insecticides that will knock out a lot more than just your caterpillars. You also knock out a lot of the good guys, the natural enemies, the predators and the parasitoids that are out there. So I recommend using an insecticidal soap, a BT product, or even something that contains spinosad, the active ingredient spinosad. So chemical control certainly is an option. However, mechanical controlling, such as pruning out the tree, is preferable to that if you can reach those areas that are affected and infested by those caterpillars. Or you can simply tolerate the damage if it's not too serious, and the tree will bounce back the following year.
So now that we have calibrated a spreader, I'd like to go through the process of seeding tall fescue. In this case, we're going to overseed tall fescue in a shady area in Oklahoma. So tall fescue seed comes in many different types. There's actually, you might see something like a Kentucky 31, which I have a little bag of here. Kentucky 31 is an old type tall fescue. It's certainly nothing wrong with it, been around for a long time, but doesn't have the turf quality that most consumers like to see. So the seed companies over the past several years have developed many cultivars of turf type tall fescue. So really for your home lawn, you want to seek out a turf type tall fescue. Well, what does that mean? With the Kentucky 31, it's going to be a little bit more light yellow green. It's going to have coarse leaf texture. What that means is it's going to have wider leaf blades. So a turf type tall fescue is going to have that more aesthetic appeal, darker green color. And plus, when it grows, it's going to have really less coarse leaf blades or skinnier leaf blades. Now, not skinny like another group of fescues, the fine fescues, but certainly more fine than a old Kentucky 31 type. And so fine fescue, since I mentioned that, are not well adapted to Oklahoma. And if we're going to use a fescue, we're going to go with a turf type tall fescue in the home yard. And so the first step that we have to do, I have to think about is just going out in the yard and collecting a soil sample. So here I have a soil core sampler, and then I have a soil sampling bag that can be sent to the Oklahoma State University soil testing lab here in Stillwater. And really what we want to look for is just, what are our nutrient needs? What's going on here with our soils? Do we need nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or what is the pH, and are there any issues with that? And if you just fill this out for a routine soil test, check the box, and then write down that this is for a tall fescue lawn, we'll send you recommendations on how to fertilize that area. Once we know that, we can proceed with preparing the area for seeding. And so we have here a really weak area that has just died out over time, and that is very common for us in Oklahoma. The cool season grasses like tall fescue do quite well in the fall and the spring in Oklahoma, but really do not tolerate our summers very well. So we actually don't recommend you use tall fescue in the full sun at all. Where it does have its place in Oklahoma could be in a more shady area. It is more shade tolerant than, say, like a Bermuda or a zoysia grass, the warm season grasses. The knock on tall fescue is that it does require more water than Bermuda or zoysia to maintain and keep alive in Oklahoma. So if water conservation is the way you're going, maybe tall fescue is not the choice, and you want to think about something, maybe a perennial garden or something in the shade versus a turf grass. However, if you need turf grass in the area, maybe for a picnic area in the shade or something like that, tall fescue is the choice. Just know it is going to get weak and you're going to have to overseed perhaps every fall. Now fall's the time to do it because in the spring it can also be seeded and do quite well, but if you come back in the fall, you just have longer time of establishment, so the roots can get established before the summer. Whereas if you go in the spring, yeah, it's going to come up and look really nice for you, but the roots are going to be weak and really die out very quickly in the summer heat. So here we're getting the area prepared by just doing what's called power raking, or really just roughing up the area so that we're preparing the seed bed for the seeding. So if we don't do this, the seed will just sit right on top. Yeah, you can water it, but it may not get down into the soil, may not germinate. If we come through and power rake it first, we're kind of preparing that seed bed, opening the soil up a little bit. So when we put that seed down, we make sure we have good seed to soil contact. And tall fescue seed is, relatively speaking, is a little bit bigger seed for other turf grasses. And so you can't really rough it up too much. Just go in there, get it nice and ready, put the seed down. If you have a tamp or something like that, after you seed it, you can come and actually pack that seed into the soil to make sure that you have that good, firm seed to soil contact. After that, we can put down our fertilizer based on our soil test recommendations, water it in, and because it is a new seeding, we're probably going to have to water this on a daily basis for the first 5 to 7 days. Then we start cutting back on that, putting more time in between waterings as the grass starts to establish. So we looked at planting just straight species tall fescue today, but it's also acceptable to look for a mix, maybe 90% tall fescue with 10% Kentucky bluegrass, and you'll find these sold at seed stores across the state. Now for more information on how to establish your lawn, maintain it, and to manage turf grass in the shade, see our fact sheets.
As the weather turns hot and dry here in Oklahoma, we tend to experience greater problems with the perennial pest, and that is the spider mite. Spider mites love to attack a wide variety of plants, including the tomatoes that we see in front of me here. The spider mites are related to insects. They are arthropods. They're more closely related to spiders, and they do their damage by feeding with piercing mouth parts to extract plant sap from the plants. And they are very tiny. We'll see a large number of them feeding clustered together on the leaves, and it'll start to the damage that we'll start to see on the tomato or other affected plant is a bronzing effect on that leaf. And that's as that plant sap is being removed from the plant. That's a symptom that we see left behind on those leaves. Of course, that can cause damage in the form of physiological harm to the plant, reducing photosynthesis. You're going to have less quality, less quantity of fruit as a result of that feeding. So again, the hot, dry weather, 90 degrees and above, very low humidity, that's when we typically will see problems with spider mites. And one method we can do that's non-chemical in nature is we can take a jet of water, take a garden hose, and spray the plants pretty heavily. Of course, you want to be careful not to do damage to your fruits. But you can essentially wash those spider mites off of those plants. And incidentally, this will work for aphids as well. If we are interested in chemical control, I recommend going for some of the reduced risk compounds, things like insecticidal soap and horticultural oil. They will basically act as smothering or desiccating agents in order to kill off those mites. You got to be careful with those two products, though. If it's too hot, they can cause harm to the plants. So we want to make sure that the conditions are right, check the label for the optimal conditions for using those products. And we certainly don't want to be using those products too frequently, because again, the more we're using that product, the more potential harm we could be giving that plant, causing that plant. So you want to be careful with those two products. Now there are some miticides out on the shelves as well that you could possibly use, but again, these are going to be more broader spectrum in nature. They're going to knock out not just the spider mites, but a lot of the good guys that are out there, your pollinators and your predators and parasites that are out there, helping to provide some natural control to your garden. So again, I recommend first and foremost for spider mite control, washing them off if you can, and if that doesn't work, select a labeled insecticide, such as an insecticidal soap or a horticultural oil for spider mite control.
We sure would love to see you Saturday, September 26th in Stillwater for Garden Fest at the Botanic Garden at Oklahoma State University. Next week, Extension entomologist Eric Rebeck is back to talk about aphids. We traveled to Ponca City, Oklahoma for the final Viewers Garden Contest winner for 2015. Former host Steve Dobbs shows some formal gardens at the OSU campus that are filled with history, and Barbara Brown prepares a summer corn salad. Join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.